All right. First rule of this channel, we not talk about this channel. Second rule of this channel, this is not legal advice. So this is going to be the 2024 fantasy football preview for the Buffalo Bills heading into training camp. A general idea is we want pieces of good offenses. And right now, the Buffalo Bills are projected to be a good offense. They finished 2023 as the 4th in yards, the 8th in passing, the 7th in rushing, and the 6th in scoring. So again, I want to put the least amount of capital I can in to try and get the most amount of return on that investment. That would be generally the idea going forward. A couple news and notes. Caleb Williams was declared the starting quarterback before rookie minicamp by the Bears. That's nothing to be surprised about. And then Zay Jones, who was cut by the Jags, he signed a 1-year, $4.25 million deal to go to the Cardinals. This is probably going to open up the offense a little bit. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant, but it does make me happy for my Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison Jr. shares. So moving on to the Bills draft class, they traded out their their first pick of the second round of the draft. They drafted Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. There's some intriguing stuff with Keon Coleman. We'll talk about him a little bit later. I think they did overdraft him. It's not the guy that I would have liked them to draft at this position. Ray Davis, running back out of Kentucky, he went to the Bills with the their fourth round pick. Trying to find that grinder that they've been looking for. I like Ray Davis. I do think down the line he would project as a mid-range bell cow RB2. Tylen Grable, offensive tackle out of UCF. I don't know anything about him. And then they drafted offensive guard prospect Travis Clayton with the International Pathway Program. Not fantasy relevant, but he is unique. 4.79 40 at 307 pounds. The tape that they showed on draft day of him like running through rugby was kind of funny going forward. So anyway, let's get into the quarterback position first. We're going to start off with Josh Allen. He finished his quarterback 1 last year, 4,300 yards passing, 29 touchdown passes to go along with 500 yards rushing and 15 rushing touchdowns. He had 18 interceptions to go along with 4 fumbles. He is a little bit of a turnover machine. This is something that we knew coming out of college when he was a kind of a gunslinger. It just took until 2023 for him to have those 18 interceptions. Now, I would probably put the over-under line for interceptions at about 15 this year. There is a possibility that he does hit 20. There's another possibility that he can keep this slightly under control. The 4,300 yards and about 30 touchdowns is the over-under line I would be looking at him. Probably going to be sticking closer to 500 yards rushing, especially with the Ray Davis addition. And then the 15 rushing touchdowns, I would probably put the over-under line at closer to 8 at this point. And at that point, with Josh Allen, he's going number 1 on ESPN. On Fantasy Pros, he's going 21 overall as quarterback 1. I think that's like way overvalued for a guy that's likely to be finishing in that sub-elite type of category. Because if we can't tell the story where he's going to hit like 5,000 yards passing or 40 touchdowns, and that's going to be hard with scoring across the league being down from 2020. He's also not likely to take a significant step forward in rushing yards, and I'm also expecting him to take that regression in rushing touchdowns with Ray Davis and James Cook in the lineup. So maybe a marginal increase in passing touchdowns is not going to make up for what I would expect is going to be a negative regression in rushing touchdowns. So at this point in the draft, like I said, with Sam Laporta, I don't like spending on last year's number 1 just to say that I got last year's number 1. I'm not drafting last year's productions. I'm drafting this year's range of outcomes. This year's range of outcomes says that Josh Allen is likely not going to finish as quarterback 1, especially if other guys down the road, like Patrick Mahomes going as quarterback 3, Lamar Jackson, who I have as quarterback 1 on Fantasy Pros, he's going as quarterback 4. If these guys take a step forward and Josh Allen has that negative regression in rushing touchdowns, he's not going to be the quarterback 1. Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes have probably higher ranges of outcomes to finish with a legendary season. They've done it before. That's where I'd be putting on my money. And with Josh Allen losing Stephon Diggs, we're trying to project out who the number 1 in the offense is. I'm a little bit concerned that there may be some type of passing regression in general with Josh Allen. Maybe one of these teams that we can say projects to be a good offense that may not quite be a good offense this year. Something to be thinking about as we go forward. The other thing with the Bills, and this is more of a peace of mind thing, Mitch Trubisky is back with the Bills. He's a poor man's Josh Allen. Not going to keep your toys on track. He is very inconsistent as a passer. From a fantasy perspective, he would be more of a one-to-one replacement with Josh Allen on a week-to-week basis. He does have the nimble bims that we do like. He is also a little bit of a turnover machine. All right, moving on to running back right now. James Cook, he did 1,100 yards rushing to go along with 2 rushing touchdowns. He did 4 receiving touchdowns to go along with 54 targets, 44 receptions, 445 yards receiving. So first things first, 240 vacated targets between Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis leaving. Vacated targets go to running backs. I'm expecting a positive regression when it comes to receiving work for James Cook. So probably looking at a guy 600 yards receiving in that area with maybe a possibility of picking up a couple more receiving touchdowns. If he did 4 receiving touchdowns last year with those vacated targets, I would probably say 5 receiving touchdowns to go along with 600 yards receiving. The two things that we're looking for in a running back, James Cook is imperfect. He has half the tail of design receiving work. He has that, and there's a possibility that he's going to get that increase. When it comes to the other thing that we like, he doesn't have, and that's going to be red zone usage. And I have this pulled up right here. So Fantasy Pros red zone usage, James Cook was 31 overall. I don't necessarily see that changing with Ray Davis coming in. Ray Davis is going to be one of those guys that we have to be paying attention to what his role and how his usage is going to be next year. And going back to the running back room with James Cook, he had a high of 75% snaps in week 16, and he was a low of 40% snaps. It looks like in week 4, he finished the season with 62% snaps in week 18, 55 in week 17. The main thing to look at with James Cook is he's an efficiency back where when he's on the field, they are getting him touches. It's just when they get in the red zone, he's not the guy that they're going to pull. They're going to hand the football to. That's why I think they brought in Ray Davis. You also have Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman that could be red zone targets. Possibility that you're going to get a positive regression. This many opportunities, 237 attempts on the ground. I would put the over underline at probably like 4 rushing touchdowns because that's just very inefficient. All he has to do is get be a little bit more efficient inside the 20, not necessarily the goal line, just inside the 20. You're going to get a little bit more rushing touchdowns. On Fantasy Pros, to pull this up, he is going at 43 overall and running back 15, which I think is undervalued. I have him as running back 7. He is at the top of his range of outcomes at running back 7. Primarily why I have him at running back 7 is because of those vacated opportunities with Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis leaving. So at running back 40 or 43 overall, running back 15, I think that's undervalued. I probably would be willing to go up about 10 picks to get him in this range of running back 12 or 11, what he finished at last year, versus expecting that he's going to have a significant regression with those vacated opportunities. Now, the 2 other running backs to talk about when it comes to the Bills are going to be Ty Johnson, expecting that he may have the role that he had at the end of last year, which was about 20% of snaps, to be the complementary backs with James Cook. Latavius Murray and Uncle Lenny, they were brought in last year. Neither of them came back. That would be the role that Ray Davis is supposed to be filling. So there is a possibility that we may get more of a 50-50 time split. Even if that's the case with Ray Davis and James Cook, the efficiency of James Cook when he's on the field, again, like 7 targets in week 12, somewhere between like 25 carries against Dallas. You're looking at a guy who's going to be in the range of about 20 opportunities a game. That's RB1 land. I like that, even though he's not going to be too efficient. So it's going to be an issue of how much Ray Davis's usage is going to cut into the red zone work, which is going to cap the rushing touchdowns for James Cook, which I'm already factoring in when I have him at running back 7. All right, let's move on to the wide receivers. So Stephon Diggs gets traded from the Bills to the Texans for a bag of chips. That's 160 targets from last year when he finished as wide receiver 10. Gabe Davis leaves. He goes to the Jags on a 3-year, $39 million a year deal, or $39 million deal, $13 million a year. 81 targets, 45 receptions, 760 or 46 yards on 7 touchdowns. So I imagine that is going to be a similar stat line 1-to-1 when we're looking at Keon Coleman. So you're looking at somewhere in the range of like a low end wide receiver 2, maybe with the top end range of outcomes for Keon Coleman. Khalil Shakir is probably not going to get the entirety of that 160 targets, even though we can speculate the top end range of outcomes for Khalil Shakir is 160. Now, the biggest issue with this, and we're going to talk about Dalton Kincaid, is how many of the opportunities he's going to get. Last year, there were points where he was operating at 77, 80% snaps, 80% snaps in week 12, 74% snaps in week 11, 76% snaps in week 10. He is going to be the number one wide receiver in the offense. It just becomes an issue of like how many opportunities they give him and how efficient he is going to be with that. I imagine he's going to be a wide receiver 2 from a fantasy perspective if the Bills offense is in that like okay to good range. Keon Coleman, again, I think he's going to be limited in that X role, probably more of a red zone guy. They also brought in Curtis Samuel on a 3-year, $24 million deal. I have his contract pulled up right here. It is going to basically be 2 years guaranteed. He's probably going to get cut by 2026, if you're wondering, and they're paying him $8 million a year. That's solid wide receiver 3 money. That's how I'm expecting him to get used in this offense. Couple other guys to talk about. Mac Hollins, they brought him in on a 1-year, $2.6 million contract, 1.1 guaranteed, special teams guy, really good football player. He's going to make the roster. Chase Claypool got brought in. I don't have a lot to say on this. If Keon Coleman wasn't the second round draft pick, I would maybe think that Chase Claypool would be interesting. And then 2 speedsters, Andy Isabella, KJ Hamler, very similar skill set. Probably not both of them are going to make the team. I imagine one might, and they might cut slightly into our receiving weapons in Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Curtis Samuel, Dalton Kincaid. So to look at Khalil Shakir first, he's wildly undervalued, and I'll pull him up on fantasy or on ESPN first to see where he's going. I should have looked this up ahead of time, and I did not. So I'm probably not going to be too interested in it. Curtis Samuel's wide receiver 54. I don't even think Khalil Shakir is probably drafted in this range. And I don't even see Keon Coleman. So anyway, going back to Fantasy Pros, Khalil Shakir is wide receiver 40 or 61 overall, 145. I have him as wide receiver 37 because of that range of outcomes that's built into him. I think he's going to get enough targets to be a wide receiver 3 at minimum. And then it just becomes like what the upside is. Depends on how many of that 240 targets go to James Cook, Keon Coleman, how many that Dalton Kincaid is able to take himself is projected to be the number 1 in this offense. And then what's left of Khalil Shakir at that point. So a wide receiver 45 with theoretical, 1-to-1 replacement for Stephon Diggs, even if it's unlikely, that is enough of a dart throw that I would be very interested in taking him at that 145 range, probably even to jump up 10 picks and have him be like, in my my 13th round draft pick to go along with that. Again, I have him as wide receiver 37. Keon Coleman is going to be like way overvalued at this point. He is wide receiver 49, 116. I would rather have like a Ladd McConkey, Blake Corum in this range. They even have like Fantasy Pros ridiculous Jonathan Brooks at 124. I'd take a Jonathan Brooks with that running back 1 range of outcomes over Keon Coleman, probably going to be capped out in that wide receiver 3. Maybe he can flirt with wide receiver 2 ranges of outcome. I was pulling this up earlier. Trying to figure out a guy that's going to be like the top end of his range of outcomes. Like maybe you're looking at DeAndre Hopkins, 75 receptions, 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns overall as that X in that offense, like, 13 points a game, somewhere around there. I could maybe see him flirting with that like low end wide receiver 2 range of outcomes for him. But there are other guys I would rather have, probably considering that I think he's going to be more of as a rookie 1-to-1 replacement for Gabe Davis. And then finally, Curtis Samuel is going to be like 130. Maybe poor man's Deebo Samuel can get used in the red zone as a running back. He's going at wide receiver 54. I have him at wide receiver 57. I think that's like safe. I mean, I think that's fair. Where he's going in your draft, not going to win you a league. I don't think Keon Coleman's going to win you a league. I think Khalil Shakir at wide receiver 45 has the best chance of being a league winner if he can get close to a 1-to-1 replacement for Stephon Diggs with those 240 vacated targets. And again, part of it depends on how close of a 1-to-1 replacement we get with Keon Coleman to Gabe Davis, how many of those targets are going to get eaten by Khalil Shakir. Vacated targets tend to go to running backs. How many of those that we can give to what's his face, James Cook. And then finally, when we get to Dalton Kincaid, potential unicorn. And I have this pulled up with all the tight ends that are out there this year, the possibility that Dalton Kincaid has those vacated opportunities, and he theoretically could be the number one in the offense. I have Mark Andrews pulled up. Range of outcomes somewhere along the lines, the top end range of outcomes for Dalton Kincaid are going to be like 154 targets, 107 receptions, 1,300 yards, like 9 touches. I could definitely see that's going to be the top end of his range of outcomes. Last year with Dalton Kincaid, if I bring him back up, he had 91 targets. So once we start getting in the range of giving him just like 30 targets, he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver or top 10 tight end. So I pull up because ESPN doesn't like to work, it appears. When I pull up like overall targets, this Evan Ingram, 143 as the number one target leader. If we give 30 targets to Dalton Kincaid, he's going to be in this like TJ Hawkinson to Sam Laporta type of tier, top 5 tight end. That's why I like him where he's going at. And then the overall range of outcomes for him to get a significant increase in targets to get that legendary range. There are enough vacated targets for him to go from like 90 to the 150 that Mark Andrews had a couple of years ago, that they are theoretically available to Dalton Kincaid. That's why I like him where he's going at. So on the case of Fantasy Pros, he is going at tight end 74. They did move up, I think, from a tight end 5 or 6 to 5. I do like this share. I probably would go up a little bit higher because I do think he's got that like a legendary unicorn type of season within his range of outcomes. The other guy to talk about in all of this is Dawson Knox. He reworked his contract. Basically, if I'm reading this correctly, he's taking a overall cut in pay. So he has guaranteed money next year in 2025. And then in 2026, they're going to owe him $10 million that they can save by cutting him. So he said, hey, pay me in 2025. I'll take less money in 2024 to stay on the team. And then I'm going to get cut in 2026. That's what it looks like is going to go on with him. So expecting that this 50-50 time split that Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid have may not quite be a 50-50. Even if it is, the higher efficiency usage, the stuff that we like, that we don't necessarily care if Dalton Kincaid is a blocker. We just want him to be a passer receiver. The pathway is still going to be there with Dalton Kincaid. I think he's slightly undervalued overall. And to finish this up, one last thing that I didn't write down that I want to talk about. When we look at Ray Davis, trying to figure out what his usage is going to be next year, whether I don't have him drafted right now. He's going on Fantasy Pros. I don't even know if he's written it down. Can't find him right now. Or 194, 58, running back 58 overall. The only guy that I think should really be prioritizing Ray Davis right now would be the guy who goes out and owns James Cook. Outside of that, he's not probably in lottery ticket range at this point to win leagues. So to finish this all off overall, as I bring this back up, I think Josh Allen is overvalued at quarterback 1, 21 overall. If I was going to pull the trigger on him, I would feel better at least waiting around to do so. And I think there's more value at Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson in this range if I'm going to go premium quarterback. Let's see. I think James Cook is undervalued at 43 overall. I'd probably be jumping him up about 10 picks. I have him at running back 7. That may be a little bit high, but around running back 11 where he finished last year, with those vacated opportunities tending to go to running backs. Let's see. Moving on. Khalil Shakir is 145 overall. I think this is criminally undervalued for a guy that probably is going to slot in to be the number 2 in an offense attached to Josh Allen. I think Keon Coleman is overvalued at 116. He's probably got a relatively capped upside, being a 1-to-1 replacement for Gabe Davis. Curtis Samuel's got a little bit of sneaky appeal, about 130 overall, coming in to be attached to this offense. I just don't know how you win the league. And then, of course, the unicorn overall is going to be Dalton Kincaid, who is severely undervalued at tight end 5, 74 overall. I probably would jump up even like 2 rounds to go get my Dalton Kincaid shares with The only guy right now out of all the tight ends, and I'll bring this up real quick, the only guy right now that I can think of from a tight end perspective that may have the pathway to really be the number one in their offense, Mark Andrews also has that pathway. He's my tight end 2, I believe. And then right now with Dalton Kincaid, he is theoretically going to be the number one in his offense overall. So that's going to be the Bills off-season fantasy football preview, and I will probably be back. I don't know if I'm going to do anything tomorrow. I might be back tomorrow or Monday with the Broncos.